Hey folks, as you can tell by the video title, SCP Heretic has officially been cancelled. Anyone who's been following along on the page can probably discern why, but for anyone out of the know, I'm going to go over everything to just clear all of this up. The Kickstarter, while still having 20-ish days left, is only 30% funded, and any additional pushes we could give it are no longer conceivably going to be enough. Regardless of this failure, I would still like to thank SCP Illustrated, Operator Drewski, Wendigoon, Site42, Volgun, Grantham, Mirror Safety, Modlight, and Spiritus for promoting the campaign either on YouTube or other social media. I would also like to thank Occult Cat, Migraines, and Aethris for making original art for the campaign, as well as Afray and Niram for letting me use their art for promotional material. So, to go over all of this, I guess I'll start from the beginning. SCP Heretic was an idea that I originally had around mid-2019-ish, and we saw it as the reasonable successor to Overlord. At the time, we really didn't foresee the scale of the budget required early on. Some of the oldest estimates were about 50 to 80 grand. In my head, it was like, okay, so it's mostly interiors, and it would be on some set we could build for not a lot of money. Fast forward to 2021, and I had finally completed a draft of the story. The gear and exterior sets weren't really an issue. Casting was also not a huge cost. The budget really exploded once we started looking for studio properties. We must have spent the entire second half of 2021 just trying to find affordable locations. This was a huge roadblock. Some of the ones we were just about to close a deal on would even get bought out for like 6 months by a streaming service, resulting in us having to start over. The reason I mention this is because I'm sure there's some degree of perceived hubris on our part. I just really want to stress that it's not like we weren't going, oh fuck, this is a ridiculous amount of money, how the fuck are we going to get this done? But honestly, by the time we were at our completed budget sheet, there was really no backing out or making alterations to costs. We had already put so much into it that we basically just said fuck it and tried to make it work. A crucial thing we didn't foresee was how bad international shipping was when we started. The costs were so high that if we enabled it, it would have eaten into our budget beyond our ability to actually benefit off the physical reward tiers. We had made an effort early on to reach out to other countries by having subtitles in the video in other languages on day one, but it was all kind of for nothing when it actually came to making rewards available, so we felt pretty bad about that. That of course meant we were exclusively marketing towards America, which I think was detrimental to our success given how the majority of our viewership is not from the United States. I guess I'll go over what our actual rationale was when it came to promotion. Roughly 0.5% of people who watched Overlord's Kickstarter video on my channel pledged to the campaign, so we knew that the reach required for this had to be extended beyond my channel and also beyond SCP altogether. I also knew that this project was never going to market within Kickstarter itself, as it was not particularly friendly to outsiders of the setting, so that meant all of our marketing had to be pitch perfect on YouTube itself. Once our initial outreach proved to be not nearly enough, our plan was to push to a community that we knew was older, had more disposable income, and also had some overlap with our channel, which was the GunTuber community. This seemed perfectly convenient because many major names in that scene had expressed an interest in being in the project, some as far back as Overlord's pre-production. To be candid, I think our fatal error in this was that we had decided to bring these people in with basically no strings attached, and then just sort of trusted that they would use their influence to carry us to the finish line out of goodwill, which they didn't. I'm not going to name names here, but plenty of people wanted to be in it, but whenever we would ask about promotion, they would conveniently leave us on red. Those who did get around to it took so long that by the time they did, it was really too late. Grantham gets a pass on this in regards to how YouTube treats his uploads, but with others, this was not the case. Of course, the savvy thing to do would have been to make direct promotion on YouTube the price of entry, especially given how many other big YouTubers were available to compete for spots. I just want to remind you guys not to attack anyone over this or start drama. At the end of the day, the project falling through is still our fault. I'm saying this to be clear as to what happened, but I'm not calling these people out or placing the blame exclusively at their feet, because at the end of the day, we're the ones who facilitated having to take these gambles, so I mean, it all still rests on us. I don't want anybody to like try and start a fucking witch hunt or anything like that. That would not help anybody. The reason I'm telling you this is exclusively to be transparent, and I'm trying to be unbiased about it. So our last and most unfortunate course of action towards the end was that we attempted to get a third party in to close the remaining funding. This would mean that Heretic would be sold as a package deal to a streaming service and then be embargoed for, I don't know, probably 3 months. It would have been a bit weird as we'd have to remove any stuff in it that connected it to the SCP universe for Creative Commons reasons and then add it back in with the cut that would eventually be on my YouTube channel, but it would have been doable. We worked this deal over for maybe 2 weeks, but it eventually fell through, and that's when we basically admitted defeat altogether. So yeah, here we are. There are many other smaller things we could have done to improve our odds, but I won't go into them here as I think you kind of get the point. Anybody ready to go, you should have done this or that, Chances are, yeah, we know. With all that said, I think I'll just sort of go over where my head's been at, given all of this, and where we're going from here. I'm really no stranger to abandoning projects. It's happened a lot on this channel. Of course, I've never abandoned one that I've put this much time, effort, and money into. I basically spent thousands of dollars into a year of my life for seemingly no gain whatsoever. With that said, there's always been a bittersweet nature to this. Yes, it's god-awful not to finish what we started, but sometimes, if I'm being honest, it can be liberating. In this case, I spent about a month in this kind of limbo period where there was a constant sense of anxiety and ambiguity about the future, and, well, I'm not in that anymore. I'm back to having a concrete goal that I can actively work towards every day. I gotta tell you, actually being in a failing Kickstarter is agony. It's indescribably awful. At some point, you've really done all you can, and there's nothing for you to do but just hope and pray that it all turns out in your favor, and yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, hopefully I never have to experience that again. As for what will become of the work that we actually did put in, I will say it is not unlikely that Heretic will see the light of day, probably just not in the way we initially intended for it. We're not giving up on it entirely. I mean, we still have so much material like on it, basically complete. We have a complete script, mood board, shot list, and like, I think, what, 2/3 of the storyboard are basically done. I mean, it would be silly if we just dropped all of it. That said, we are indeed moving on. We are not going to relaunch the project. Instead, we're going to move on to a much more manageable project that we are a lot more confident we can actually deliver to you. Now, I won't go into any great detail on it, but I will provide for you one clue as to what it will be. Take care, folks.